Hey guys! All right, so today's lesson we are going to be talking about adding integers. We will also be talking about subtracting integers. So our learning intention for adding integers is to be able to find the sums of integers. And you'll know that you're successful when you can explain how to model addition of integers on a number line. You would be able to find the sums of integers by reasoning about absolute values, and you will be able to explain why the sum of a number and its opposite is 0. So we're going to start first with some vocab review. This is review that we just were talking about. We were just learning about these terms, and so it should be fresh in your mind, and hopefully you're looking at this and going, oh, I don't need her to tell me the definition. I've got this. But just in case, the absolute value is the distance between a number and 0 on the number line. Okay, and this is how we write absolute value. Another example is the absolute value of -8 equals 8. So if I was going to put it on the number line, I would start at the -8, and then I would make my line go all the way back to 0, and then I'm just going to count how far from this to 0 is it, and that tells me that what my absolute value is. Okay, so an integer, remember we were struggling a little bit on integers, but an integer is a whole number and its opposite. So something important to remember, it is a whole number, so it cannot be a fraction, it cannot be a decimal, it has to be a whole number. Here are some examples of integers. So 5 and -5, both would be integers. That's the whole number and its opposite. 3 and -3 would be a whole number and its opposite. 2, -2, so forth and so on. It doesn't matter how small or how big the number is. It just has to be a whole number or the opposite. Okay? So let's move into our new vocab. Our new vocab, these are not super challenging, but they are important terms for you to become familiar with, okay? So this first one is called additive inverse. The additive inverse is the opposite of a number. That's it. So sometimes we get a little excited about our words in math and make them a little bit more complicated, but this isn't a hard one. Additive inverse just simply means it's the opposite of a number. So for an example, -3 is the additive inverse, or the opposite of 3. Okay? Our other term is called zero pairs. Zero pairs is when a number and its additive inverse, which recall I just said that just means opposite. So a number and its additive inverse, when added together, equals 0. Okay, so to get a zero pair, you're taking a number and its additive inverse, or its opposite. You're adding them together, so now they're going to equal 0. Okay, so this is an example here. If I have 4 and then I add -4, I'm going to start here at 0. I'm going to go to 4. Then I'm going to then draw another arrow going 4 units to the left to represent adding -4. So go back here, which takes me to 0. Same with this, 6 plus -6 equals 0. If you have $6 and you spend $6, you now have $0. Okay? Any questions you have about the vocab review or the new vocab right now is a great time to star those problems, star any areas, write any questions, any concerns, misunderstandings that you might have, so that we can talk about it during our recap. All right, we're going to move on to the next side. So the first rule we're going to talk about is the same sign rule. So when you're adding integers with the same sign, so both are positive or both are negative, you're going to add their absolute values, and then you're going to keep the common sign. Okay, so whatever that common sign is that they share. So let's look at this example here. So if I had -4 and I'm adding negative 2. First, I can just add their absolute values. So I know the absolute value of negative 4 and the absolute value of negative 2 is 4 and 2. So I'm going to add those together. 4 plus 2 is 6. And then I'm going to use the common sign. Okay, so I'm going to take the sign that they both share, and I'm going to add it to that 6. So now I know it is negative 6. Okay. The next one is different signs. So there is a different rule for when the signs are different. When adding two integers with different signs, subtract the lesser, which just means smaller, absolute value from the greater, or the bigger absolute value, and take the sign of the integer with the greater or bigger absolute value. Okay, so what that means is that if I have 5 plus negative 10, I am going to subtract the lesser absolute value from the greater, so I'm going to subtract the smaller absolute value from the bigger absolute value. So I'm taking both of these. The absolute value of negative 10 is greater than the absolute value of 5, right? So that means I'm going to subtract the absolute value of 5 from the absolute value of negative 10. And that gives me 5. And then I'm going to use the sign of the negative 10 because that is the greater absolute value. That's the bigger number. So I am going to use the sign for that one. Okay, so when it's absolute value, it's the bigger number. When I'm looking over here, it's not, right? So I'm using the bigger number, absolute value number, to keep that sign. So the sum is negative 5. Any questions about the same sign, different sign rule? Please highlight or add a star, write a question, whatever you need to do somewhere here so that we can talk about it. Okay, I'm going to have you try out a few questions down here. Try all 1 through 6. See how you do. We will review these during the recap time. So go ahead and pause the video, answer these questions, and then jump back on when you're finished. Awesome. All right, so we are going to move on to our subtracting integers. This is just one page. So subtracting integers, our learning intention for this is to find the difference of integers. The way that you'll be able to know if you're successful is you should be able to explain how subtracting integers is related to adding integers. You'll be able to explain how to model subtraction of integers on a number line. And you'll be able to find differences of integers by reasoning about absolute values. Okay, so here's what we do with subtracting integers. To subtract, we're going to add this in here. So to subtract an integer, you have to add its opposite. Add its opposite. Here's what I mean. So if I have 3 minus 4, I can change it to 3 plus negative 4. Okay, look at it here. So if I have 3, I'm going to go this way, 3, and then I'm going to subtract 4, gets me to negative 1, right? But another way to do it would be 3, and then I'm going to add negative 4. Same difference, okay? So 3 adding negative 4 brings me to the negative 1. So the opposites, 3 minus 4 is negative 1. 3 plus negative 4 is also negative 1. These are opposites, or what do we just learn? Those are called the additive inverse. So here's some more examples for you. So find negative 8 minus negative 13. So negative 8 minus negative 13, I'm going to add the opposite of this. So I'm going to say negative 8 plus 13. So I add the opposite of negative 13, and then I add them together. So what is negative 8 plus 13? Well, that is 5. This question over here, 5 minus negative 4. So if I have 5 minus negative 4, I'm just going to change it to the opposite. So it's now going to be 5 plus 4. Because remember, we talked about a negative and a negative equal a positive. So if there's two negatives here, they're just going to cancel each other out and they're going to make a positive. Okay, so 5 minus negative 4 is now 5 plus 4. So add the opposite of negative 4. And then 5 plus 4, 9. Okay, so you're taking the things that you've learned with adding integers, and that's how when you change it to add its opposite. This looks familiar, doesn't it? 3 plus negative 4. We were just looking at problems very similar to that on our other page. So 4 plus negative 4, or negative 7 plus 3. These are things that we were just looking at, and we are just changing the subtraction, adding its positive, and then solving. Okay, so you're going to stop the video, try these ones. So if I have negative 7 minus negative 2, I'm going to add the opposite. So I'm going to add the opposite. What's the opposite of negative 2? 2. And then I'm going to add them together. If I have negative 7, if I'm on the number line, if I have negative 7, and then I add 2, I'm jumping forward 2, which gets me to negative 5. Okay? You try the rest of these problems. And if you have any questions about subtracting integers, any of these examples didn't make sense, if you're confused by the problems at the bottom, star them, write your questions, and we will chat about them during our recap. Have a great day.